Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about harmonizing the whole tone scale. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 6.16 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So now that you know how to build the whole tone scale, I'm going to talk about harmonizing it. And really what I'm talking about is just one chord that lies within this scale that's really common to use when you're using this scale. And you don't harmonize this like the major scale or the harmonic minor scale where you have the one chord then the two chord. It's more like the diminished scale where there's different chords that live within it that are common to harmonize within the scale. And like I said, with the whole tone scale, there's really one chord that's really common. Just like with the diminished scale, it was the diminished seventh chord, or the whole half scale, it was a diminished seventh chord. So like I said in the last lesson, a common chord that you would use this over or that you could build from the scale would be like a G7 sharp 5 or G7 flat 5. And I showed you how to build that from the scale where it was root 3 flat 7 in either a flat 5 or a sharp 5. It doesn't have a perfect fifth, but that's a common chord from the whole tone scale, or a common sound to create if you were soloing over a dominant chord. But the chord I want to talk about getting from this scale now is actually the augmented chord, because it's really common to play the augmented chord when you're playing the whole tone scale. So if you're in the key of G like this is showing, you could play the augmented anywhere, but if I just start on this root and take my root 3 sharp 5, I have an augmented chord right there. It's just an augmented triad in close position. It would look like that. It would be a G augmented chord because I'm in the key of G. I could harmonize this up the scale and just play the inversion, so then I would have first inversion and second inversion. This is my root position, obviously. But a really common thing to do with the whole tone scale is not just take it from the root and play it up the inversions. A really common thing to do would actually be just to play augmented chords every whole step. So if I just started with G augmented in the key of G, then I would just move up in whole steps holding the augmented chord, and each whole step where I landed would be my new root, and then I'd just be playing augmented chords up the fretboard in whole steps. That's a really common thing to do, to either play it as chords or play it as single notes or arpeggiate it and play it up and down the fretboard really fast. You'll hear that a lot in different types of music, especially in like gypsy jazz or anything that's come from that style. But it's done in jazz and other styles as well. So then instead of looking at it as G augmented and its inversions, you could look at it as G augmented, which is what you're starting on, but then A augmented, B augmented, D flat augmented, E flat augmented, and F augmented. So each one of those whole steps landing on that new whole step would just be your new root, and you'd just be taking augmented chords up the fretboard in whole steps. And like I said, that's a really common thing to do when you're harmonizing this scale. And obviously you can get different shapes for the augmented chords. You don't just have to play the shape I'm showing. I just showed that shape on those strings because it's a common shape, but anywhere you have root 3 sharp 5, you can play an augmented chord and take that in whole steps up and down the fretboard. And taking an augmented chord up and down in whole steps is the most common with the whole tone, but you can really do it with any chord cell. Just like I was talking about when you're soloing, you could take any shape and just move it up and down in whole steps. Any chords that you find within the whole tone scale, and you don't even have to think about the intervals if you just find a shape that you like. For example, if you took a shape like this, you could just move that up in whole steps. It doesn't matter. Any shape that you find in the whole tone scale, you can move up in whole steps and the shape stays the same. And that's a really unique thing about this scale, and a thing that makes it really easy to play a lot of stuff with it really quickly. But like I said, it can also make it sound really monotonous really quickly, so you don't want to do that constantly. It might be something you do for a quick run up the fretboard and then go to something else. It can be a really nice effect. You don't just have to do it with augmented chords, that's the most common, but you can do it with other shapes as well. And you wouldn't even have to do full chords. You could just do two notes at a time, move them up in whole steps or anything. So that's ways you can harmonize the whole tone scale. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk more about the augmented chord. And be sure to download the e-guide. All the diagrams are in there. And be sure to subscribe because we have at least one new lesson every day.